Hi, I'm Ron,
And I'm Don.
and this is the Ron and Don Show, coming to you today live from Bricks 33 in Newport Richey, Florida. Our gracious host.
Wonderful place, beautiful, and lots of good food, and as you can tell,
Plenty of inventory.
exactly.
Today's topic for the Ron and Don Show is CO2 and the storage of CO2 in your restaurants.
The hazards for CO2 are kind of simple. If you have 1% of the air or 10,000 parts per million, you are potentially in a very hazardous situation. CO2 displaces the oxygen in the atmosphere, so you can literally suffocate from a leak or from that displacement. In fact, I've had an employee that was in a couple of restaurants that were affected by it. One of them went into a walk-in cooler that had leaking valves in the cooler for the beer system, and they took a deep breath, and a few seconds later keeled over. Fortunately, their feet propped open the door, and they were dragged out and sent off to the hospital and ended up fine. If the door hadn't been propped open just a little bit, if they hadn't been in the right position, they could have easily died in there in a matter of minutes.
That's a pretty scary story, Don, and in fact it's stories like that that have prompted more than 23 states at last count to enact regulations for the safe storage and use of CO2 within restaurants.
These regulations oftentimes require you to monitor and or alarm the storage place for the CO2 and the primary usage points where CO2 is utilized, at the bag in the box or in the walk-in coolers or anywhere else that you have regulators and controls. Now, this is monitors in some cases, sometimes it's just alarms, sometimes you have to have them both. It very much depends on situations.
Well, and the situation being the size of the storage tank itself, because there are regulations and requirements for tanks that are under 100 pounds that are far different than the regulations for tanks over 100 pounds.
In some areas you don't have to monitor or alarm if you have good ventilation at floor level, because CO2 is heavier than air, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that you evacuate that area and are bringing fresh air in. So there's ways around the monitoring and alarming, but generally speaking, in most cases, that's where you're going to end up.
So as you can imagine, with 23 states already enacting regulations in this regard, there could be a wide array of requirements between the states and from state to state.
Yeah, you need to contact your local vendor. They'll know exactly what that jurisdiction, that health department, that boiler inspector in that area, what they are requiring for the use of CO2 in your restaurants.
I'm Ron.
And I'm Don.
This is the Ron and Don Show. We invite you yet again to remember to subscribe.